welcome. My name is Dwayne. I am the founder of Maverick Games Learning and Support Services. The stream that you're watching tonight is going to be talking about a new virtual tabletop that I've discovered called Harpy. And I'm going to be showing you some of the ins and outs on how to use Harpy and talk a little bit about Dungeons & Dragons and how I like to play my games of Dungeons & Dragons online. So strap in and hopefully you learn something. So Harpy is a virtual tabletop in a very crowded field of virtual tabletops, ranging anywhere from Roll20 to Foundry to a bazillion other virtual tabletops. And trust me when I tell you that I have indeed gone and tried an abundance of them since I started playing D&D online. My journey to D&D online started probably back in 2018. No, actually, I would say probably before that, but really took off during COVID, as with everybody else, and it became a necessity to play these kind of games online. So, as part of my business, Maverick Games Learning and Support Services, I host about 4 sessions weekly of Dungeons & Dragons played online. And so I've become a little bit of an expert on virtual tabletops and how to use them and which ones to use and how to effectively bring D&D to my players. So tonight we're going to talk about one that just came out of nowhere for me, and it was just kind of happenstance. I stumbled upon this and I am so glad I did. So let's take you on a tour to start with. So Harpy, one of the unique things about Harpy is that it is a 3D tabletop, and when I say 3D tabletop, I quite literally mean it. Harpy will take your two-dimensional maps, it will place them on a 3D play space, does not take your maps and turn them into 3D, but it puts it on a 3D table so that you have actually control to rotate and look at your map as though it was sitting on your tabletop. Taking that a step further, Harpy gives you the tools to actually create and or buy digital miniatures. Now I know you're thinking like this is coming next year with Wizards of the Coast. Harpy's got out of the gate a lot quicker. Now, there are services like Foundry that does this already, and Tabletop Simulator. I don't know if Foundry does, but I know Tabletop Simulator does. And that is something that is being used currently. What makes this a very unique experience is that it does not require computing power. And what I mean by that is that you don't need to worry about your computer processor handling all the 3D loads that is placed on it. This is all done in browser. So when you come to Harpy, you're going to want to set up an account, obviously. A little tip there, Harpy will assign a random username. Go up there and change it just to make it easier on your players. But you're going to be greeted with a home page, and this home page will lay out 3 components of Harpy. One is building your world, 2 is playing on a virtual table, and then 3 is writing your story. I haven't quite got 100% used to how everything connects to each other, but I'm almost there. We're going to start out by talking about building your world. So you're going to want to go up there and click on Build Your World. Now I've got some worlds created already, and I'll show you what those are in a little bit, but I'm going to show you what it's like to create your world. Think of your world as your campaign, I guess would be another way to say it. And the reason why Harpy makes this available is that not only are you going to be playing your games on a virtual table, but Harpy actually gives you the tools to actually archive and create content for your game world, which means if you have adventures, you have NPCs, you have stories, you have items, monsters, you name it, Harpy is set up to act as sort of a depository for all of that in a very cool way, and I'll show you that as well. So your first stop would be up under there, creating a world, and basically just naming your campaign. I'm just going to show you what this looks like, but I'm not going to go into total depth because I do have some already prepared. So let's just say you've got a world, and let's just call it the Forgotten Realms for now. Okay, and you can go and attach your own unique thumbnail to it. So I'm going to do that right now. Let's search through my computer. Let's see what we got here. I'm actually running a Forgotten Realms campaign. There we go. Once you've created your world, simple as that, you're going to have a few different panels available to you. The first one is the name of your world at the top there. And you're going to have the option to invite players. And we'll get to some of the other things at the top there. On top of that, you'll have a little thing that says entities. Entities, as far as Harpy is concerned, is content. So the reason why they call it entities is you can have different type of entities. You can have characters, creatures, events, you can have places, stories, etc. So these are all things that you would create for your world. I'm going to give you an example of what creating a character would look like, because it's important when you go to create characters, or as your players come into this game world, you're going to need to create character, quote unquote, character slots. So I'm going to go plus, and it's going to pop up and say, let's create a new entity. And again, they refer to everything as entity. So whether you click on a character, a monster, a place, they're going to call it an entity, and that's just a thing. So don't get confused when you see entities and what are you doing? You're creating an entity. You know, one thing that the developers might want to consider doing as they are developing this platform is maybe just considering calling it what it is. So if you're creating a character, say create a character, just to help with the confusion. We're going to upload a picture of a character. And again, this would be a player character in your adventure, or an NPC, could be both. I've got some artwork by an amazing artist named Max Dunbar. And he has just been inspiring me left, right, and center these days with his artwork to get me reinvigorated playing D&D. So I'm going to put some of his artwork in here for this entity. So there you go. You got this entity here. Now it's going to actually, the cool thing about this is it pre-populates a token circle. And the reason why that's cool is because the game will actually pre-populate and pre-create tokens for you based on this image. So for example, if I go in here and highlight Max's wonderful art and say that's what I want to see, not only will it use it as a thumbnail, but this will actually get turned into a token for the gameplay. And I'll show you that. So I'm just going to type in the name Karasta. I just made that up on the fly. Karasta. I'll put down a Tiefling Ranger. Sure. I create that. So voila, we have a entity created in Harpy, and specifically a character. Now, it will immediately take you to this page. It's important to note that Harpy doesn't currently have character sheets. So this is a virtual table first and foremost, and they are working on game agnostic character sheets. So hopefully in the next few months you'll see something where you'll be able to actually go in and type your character's information. I don't believe it's going to be as simple as just clicking a button and all your information gets ported over from whatever system you're using. So for all you D&D Beyond users out there, you're not going to be able to actually just do a one-click import option. So I think you'll probably have to create it. However, they do have an option to use Roll20 or D&D Beyond in conjunction with Harpy, and I can talk about that later as well. But for now, you're greeted with this. So you've got a codex, which if you're not familiar with what the term codex means, is basically, I go so and say like a book or an archival of information. Typically that's what a codex is. You have a gallery. So if you want, you can actually, because again, you're building your game world here, right? And you're building your story. So if you want, you can actually go in and you can say, you know what, I want to put some images to go with this character entry. There we go. And I click on it and I go update. And now that image is in the gallery. And then you can basically, you can do screenshots of things, whatever you want to put into your gallery, so that if somebody or else in your campaign wants to, do some casual reading up on the story and stuff, they can visit and say, oh, that's some cool pictures. Chat history is just obviously if you're, chatting within the game itself, it's going to pull up a history there. Everything you've ever said, it says. Here's the fun part. And this is all leading to the virtual table concept. Remember I told you how it creates a it creates a token for you? Voila, there it does. And I'll rotate that around so you can see. So that's sort of a, because it's a black and white image, it's obviously going to be a black and white token. But, if you were playing on a flat surface, there's your token. Harpy does one step further and creates it in 3D. So you can see it's got a rim around it and an edge to elevate it off the table. Now, while we're here, I'm going to show you another cool aspect of Harpy. It's not going to be specific to this character because I haven't created one for this character, but I'm going to import a paper token. Now, a paper token, somebody referred to as pawns within the Pathfinder and Starfinder community that are called pawns, but basically they're just flat tokens with a front and back that stand up. And I've already pre-created some of these, so I'm going to go and import one. And like I said, it has nothing to do with the Tiefling Ranger, but it is one that I've imported. So I'm going to go and see if I can find it. So this particular image that I'm uploading is different than some of the images you might find on the internet. I've gone into Photoshop and remove the background of this image. So that when I upload this, the background's transparent, and you'll see why in a second. So you just click on it to confirm it, and it quickly renders a version of that. But you'll notice that it's sitting on a token. So let's save it. It's rendering and saving. And it's now listed under paper tokens. So I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to make this one my default. As you can see, it's a flat token. I've gone and actually removed the background. So what you're going to see on the front and back of this is the same image. And so this is now a ready pawn for this character in your game. So we're going to come back to this, but I want to show you one more thing. And this is really where, this is dangerous for me, but this is really where the fun is with this tabletop. So you've seen what a flat character pawn looks like. You've seen what a token looks like. If you haven't heard of Hero Forge yet, you're going to want to. I'll go to it right now. Hero Forge is a website where you can actually design your own miniatures, custom miniatures. Again, rendered in browser. Now, I've been using Hero Forge for quite a while now. I've actually ordered digital files from Hero Forge, where I can buy the STL file and feed that into a digital printer or 3D printer and get my miniature printed. So I have a gentleman locally who did that for me. You can actually order the miniatures from Hero Forge. You can create it and order the mini itself, and they'll send it to you. You can even order pre-painted, laser painted miniatures from Hero Forge. So this is a 3D tool, and you can see it right here. So you can create your miniature in glorious 3D. It's very cool. But you can also buy a digital 3D version of this miniature. So if you are playing online almost exclusively, you can do that. I'm going to show you what that looks like in Harpy. So I've already bought some, and this is the dangerous thing, is it's so easy to do. And you can go and create stuff in Hero Forge, and the cost is pretty easy. I mean, right now, when you look at buying a physical miniature, now granted, there's lots of joy that comes from physical miniatures, but if you're like me as a dungeon master for D&D, my D&D miniatures aren't at the top of my pride and joy list, meaning I'm buying them to service my games, and I'm flash painting them to get them on the table looking good as quickly as possible. They're not like my miniature games, where I spend oodles and oodles of hours painting them to make them look just beautiful. Maybe one day I'll get there with my D&D figures, but for now they just serve a purpose. So when I go into a local store, I'm spending about $5-6 for a couple figures. These are $7.99. But the neat thing is I can also buy pre-created packs from Hero Forge. So if I need goblins, they sell a goblin pack, which is like 5 goblins for $7.99. By contrast, I get about half of that if I pay $5 at a local store. Here's how you add a Hero Forge mini in. So I've already gone and linked my account with Hero Forge. So anything I buy from Hero Forge just automatically comes into Harpy. Like I don't even need to save a file, upload a file. If I buy something from Hero Forge, within 20 minutes, it's in Harpy for me in full 3D form. So I'm going to attach to our Tiefling guy, I'm just going to attach just a random mini. Now these are some of the free ones that they've given us. So I'll just go here, click that, and set that as my default. So now we've gone from a paper mini to a full 3D mini. So if your mind's not blown at this point, wait till I get to the next step, but just pure cool. And I'll talk about why that's cool in a sec. So anyway, this is your character that you've just entered. I'm going to go back to our campaign page right now. If you're wanting to build your world, I would advise on a one-to-one basis, as needed, create entities for everything. So if you have characters, if you have NPCs, if you have monsters, if you have places, areas, geography. So anything that you have in your campaign that your players are going to interact with or visit, put it in your world as an entity. Specifically with monsters and characters, because as you play, you can attach tokens to these entities, whether they be the 3D ones you buy from Hero Forge or just paper tokens or just flat tokens. And you can have them attached to these entities. And that's important because as you're dragging things onto the tabletop, you want to have information attached to it. Right now, the only information is what I showed you previously in the form of that codex. So you're not going to be able to actually see character sheets and stats like that, but there are clever ways to do it. One thing that you can do if you want to fill in your entity or your codex, you can go up here to edit, and you'll see that you have page 1. So I'm going to name this, I'm going to just show you something here. I'm going to go over here and go page 1. I'm going to go overview. So I've renamed that overview. And I want to put some information about Karasta in there. So I'm going to hit this plus button right here, and I'm going to add a block. A block is essentially like blank pages. And bingo, you have a word editor. So you can actually start writing information. So I'm actually going to just type something just to show you what it looks like. So Karasta is a ranger who has been shunned by his village and wanders the Sword Coast looking for redemption. Okay. And if you wanted to, you could put a picture in there. There you go. When you save that. So now, when you visit this codex, you can see Karasa, Tiefling Ranger, and then all of these, think of these as like chapters, are going to be down here. And you now can chronicle his journey. You can write about him. And if you're clever, until they release their character sheet, you could even go and import a D&D character sheet into here if you wanted to. It's as simple as just going here and creating a new page. And you can call it character sheet. There you go. And then you can just go and add another block and start entering character sheet information. So that's kind of cool. So I'm going to go back to our world. And you can just do that with anything. You can do that with monsters, and I'm going to show you now why that's important. So I'm going to go over to one of my pre-done campaigns. Let's do the realm. And that's the one that I was just doing today. Let's see how this works. So the realm is got, if you look down here, you're going to see it's got 3 characters in it. I've got 3 creatures. I've got a place. So I've actually added some entries into this. I'm going to show you what some of these look like, actually. So below you'll see the characters. In this campaign has a character named Artigan, has a character named Jairus, and has a character named Milton. Okay, so there's 3 different characters. I've added some creatures in. I've added codexes for each one of them. I've even added a place. Right down here, I have a story running, which is my notes. And I even have some notes down here, which is some new rules and a story. So I'm going to show you what some of that looks like. So here's my characters. Now my character sheets for these guys are just empty placeholders currently. So they don't serve any other purpose other than to have a token attached to them. So that's the main reason why I have individual character sheets. Same with Jairus. I've got one for Milton. There's no codex information, but I do intend to add stuff into that to buff up the story and to add flavor to the story. Going back, creatures. Now the creatures are a little bit different because these are things that I want to reference on the fly from when my players are playing. So I've actually gone and embedded an image of their stat block. And you'll see how I would access this during the game. So I have this information on hand. Same thing with the kobold, and the same thing with this thing here, which is a white. I got clever with the white at the end. I'm going to show you why. So here I embedded the actual cultist stat block. Now nothing on this is rollable, right? I haven't linked this to anything other than the fact that I can do manual dice rolling. Same thing with the kobold. But watch what happens when I click on it. You notice that there's a thing there. So if I click on this, it actually goes to my D&D Beyond stat block. So now I can roll this if I want. If I want to actually use my D&D Beyond for rolling purposes and interacting. But in this case, I've actually gone and downloaded the extension of Beyond 20, and it will send its rolls into Harpy. But that's how I got clever with the stat blocks. Now, I did the same thing with the white because I realized I don't even need the stat block there. I just have the picture of the white. So I click on it, and it takes me right there. And I'll show you again how you access that within the Harpy system. But that's why I made these codex entries. Now, places, this is another entry that I put in here. This is for my players. I've actually created this so that this lives in the game in the Harpy as well, so the players can reference this on the fly. The idea with a good virtual table is not to have too many destinations for your information. I mean, ideally you would have everything living under one hood. It minimizes the amount of distraction and time. So right now we're juggling between D&D Beyond and Harpy within my groups, but the goal will eventually be just to leave D&D Beyond alone and just keep everything in Harpy. with the character sheets and such. That's the goal. Okay, but you'll see here that I've created some chapters. So I've created an overview of the Featherska region, so players can come here and read up on it. I've created some specific chapters called Summer's Nest, which is the main town that we're in. And then I've even put in a little, I guess, chapter, you could call it, on notable NPCs. So that's how I would use, as a DM, I would use a codex entry. Then the other way is your actual game notes. Now, the players don't have privy to this, so they're not actually going to be able to access this or see this. But again, I've gone and put my D&D, my adventure, right in Harpy now into a codex called the Featherska campaign. And these are the various chapters that I've gone and broken down, so that as I'm playing, I can actually pull this information up. Right down to dialogue boxes, just like you'd see in a D&D Beyond or Roll20 website where they're actually having a digital version of your adventure. So I've gone and put that into a codex entry. I put some notes in as well, and notes are play accessible. So notes on the adventure. Intro talks about our past adventure and what's going on with the quest. The players can come here and read this. Now, for those of you who know, I'm working on a revised edition of Dungeons & Dragons within our own community called the Epic Edition of D&D, D&D Epic Edition. And so I've gone and put that content in Harpy as well for players to access. So all the rules and stuff that we've created are there, so we don't have to go fumbling through a Word doc or something like that, or a Google presentation where I've put it. It's all right there, and that's going to live on the tabletop. I'm going to show you what the virtual table aspect of Harpy is all about, which is the real exciting part. So I'm going to click on Play on Virtual Table, and these are pre-done tables. Each one of these tables is connected to one of my campaigns, one of my worlds. So the one that we were just dealing with was the Epic Edition, The Realm. So this table is called Restless Nights Graveyard. The campaign story is Restless Nights. So I'm going to go to Outside the Crypt first. So welcome to Harpy's virtual table. I'm going to shed some light on this so that it's not so dark. So welcome to the Harpy virtual table. I'm going to give you an overview of this. So that's what your normal virtual table would look like. I always like to demonstrate like this. Very flat, right? Roll20, whatever game it is. You know, you've got a nice table like that. Well, there's your Harpy version right there. So again, like I said, it's like taking your mat and placing it on a table, right? It's not 3D, still flat, but the world that it exists in is three-dimensional. And if you have tokens, I'm just going to get rid of these for now so we can see things a little bit easier. Now, one of the key things about this, the whole time that I've been using this, I've been evaluating it, is does it run? Does it run well? And I can confidently tell you that it does. It truly does. You know, the struggle that I have with virtual tables is that inevitably they slow down my computer, or my computer isn't up to the task of running them. And that's quite common with Roll20. When I have multiple services running with like Discord, Roll20, I try and pull up some slides. I go to the web browser. Everything is taxing. I was really worried that this system wouldn't run smooth because it's browser based, and holy cow was I wrong. I'm going to put some stuff on the table, and I'm going to explain to you how this is going to help your games. It's not just the technology. I'm going to put some Hero Forge tokens down. Let's put that one from earlier. Okay, now one of the things I learned is that if you hold down Shift, it actually snaps to grid. So voila. We have a fully 3D Hero Forge created token. And a wonderful camera system lets you zoom in as close or as far away from that token as you like. So I'll let the amazement of that settle in on you for a second, and I'm going to talk to you about why this has really got me excited. You know, I've been dungeon mastering for 35 years of my life. Pretty much, actually more, 37 years, I think, of my life. The one thing that has been the most important thing for me was getting my players to imagine the world as I see it in my mind. Evoking that imaginative response from players. And, you know, playing in person, it can be a challenge, you know, and descriptions and voices and stuff like that. But playing online, even more so. And playing online with digital tables brought out another challenge. And that was by placing graphical assets in front of players, maps, tokens, things like that, you basically started to erode their imagination. I learned this when I was a kid playing in-person role-playing games. It was Marvel Superheroes, and my core box came with a battle mat. First time I ever had seen that, and it came with tokens for all the characters, and I was quite impressed. I was like, oh wow, in my mind, like, oh, this is really going to be amazing. This is long before like online video games, right? And what happened was something I never could have expected. Is my players and I started to zone out of the game being a role play game and treated it like a board game. And I would stop describing things, relying on the fact that they could already see it in my mind. So why would I describe what the city was like? Or why would I describe what the cement looked like, or the buildings, or the people around, or the sounds and stuff? So really our games of Marvel started becoming these kind of just generic, battles. It was like a pre-early years miniature game that I didn't know I was playing. So that was my first encounter with what images and such could do to remove your imaginative play. Up until that point, we played D&D around a table, and I described every little thing they saw. So the challenge with online is that now that I've placed this in front of you, as a dungeon master, you have the added responsibility of maintaining that level of theater of the mind. So point in case, for example, a DM who didn't really consider this might say, okay, so there you are, and so that's what you see. What do you want to do? And the player would go, okay, well, I'm gonna go over here, and so what is that? So this is the type of verbal exchange you're starting to hear, and that's horrid. That's quite awful. It scares the crap out of me. Like, how this would be played in my mind is the dungeon master would say, you're standing along a path in the middle of the night. A graveyard is on either side of you, and you see the flickering of light from two urns on either side of the crypt in front of you. Overhead, you hear some birds flying, and you hear the cackling of some crows. Wind is blowing, and the rain is just starting to pick up. That's what you should do. And then as a player, your responsibility, or if you don't want that responsibility, the dungeon master's responsibility, to say, before you start moving your tokens around, I want you to describe what you're doing. What are you doing? Don't just do it, move your token. So, the player, your responsibility is to say, well, I carefully move over to the door of the crypt, pulling my cloak around me so as not to get wet, perhaps to rust my armor, and I see if the door is locked. Simple as that. You don't have to go too far with descriptions. What we just did there is we still used our imagination, despite the fact that we have a wonderful virtual table and lots of assets around us. So that's the danger of a virtual table, in essence, not just Harpy, but just virtual tables, period. But the positives, the fact that you now see a fully realized version of your character, and it's just something about that pulls you into the game that much more. It's like playing with action figures as a kid, and you're sitting there in your bedroom, having Cobra Commander fight Duke from G.I. Joe, and you're like mushing them together, pretending that they're fighting. So that's just you. Now let's drop something else in and see if this creates an imaginative response in you right now. Well, let's just say we've got a goblin. Okay. Now again, these are paper ones. If you've created these in Hero Forge, and I have for some of my other campaigns, you'd be able to see like a fully 3D. But for our purposes, let's stay with this. So again, now you're just throwing more visual, and it's amazing. Like now, like this is me, but just the fact that I'm staring at some fully realized imagery while I'm playing the game. And again, as a dungeon master, my responsibility isn't just to plunk the token down and say, you see that. It's to say, sneaking up behind you, you hear the footsteps behind you. You spin around, you see a small green-skinned creature wearing tattered clothes, wielding a blade in each hand. He cackles at you as he suspected he had you at a disadvantage, and then he quickly realizes he does not and readies for combat. Something simple like that. But again, more than just sort of saying, here, you see this, and let the players decide what this is. So So that's sort of the ebb and flow of how this tabletop works. You're not really replacing your game with a ton of built-in tools. Harpy excels for its simplicity, and I'm sure that will change as the months and years go by. But the simplicity of it is the beauty of it. It allows you to play your game without having to adopt an entirely new system and learning, right? You're still using D&D Beyond or your physical character sheets. Heck, you could still be rolling physical dice, right? It doesn't really affect that. It doesn't change that. I'm going to show you some cool things, though, as we go along here. So right off the bat, if you want more screen real estate, go ahead and give yourself some more screen real estate. Harpy allows you to close those windows so you're not feeling claustrophobic. You can zoom all the way out if you want to get a grandiose view. And then if you want, and players actually have control of this themselves. So this is not you controlling it for the players. The players can zoom around and get better views of it. One of the things that Harpy does not have right now is the ability to create a very detailed fog of war system. So it does have basic fog of war where you can block off blocks of the map not to be seen, but it doesn't prevent movement through those fog of war areas. So you have to have some ground rules with your players and make sure they understand that. But the option there is to paint off sections of the map. Another cool thing is that it does give you a on-screen initiative tracking. So right down here there's something that says fight. Clicking on fight, you can actually go in and add combatants. So for example, you can go in here and add some of these pre-done characters. Jarus, all three of these guys I'll add. And again, those require that you have codex entries, of course. And let's just go in and add a kobold, even though it's not a kobold, it's a goblin. We go submit. So now we have 4 combatants, and you're not rolling initiative in Harpy and it's stitching over to the tracker. Again, it's not that advanced yet. But you're simply going in and typing in your initiative numbers just manually. Like you ask the players, hey, what'd you roll for initiative? Oh, I rolled this. Okay, great. So once you do that, click on fight. Harpy goes and populates a combat tracker. This is more akin to the type that you see in video games and some RPGs in video games that you play, where it will show like a picture of the character down at the bottom, and as you progress each round, it just populates the next person. But the tracker gives you a more, I want to say, a more friendly look than simply a number. So right now you can look at this tracker, and all the players will see this on their screen. So this is not unique to the DM. So all the players immediately see this, and they can start planning ahead, going, okay, so it's so-and-so, then it's my turn, okay, so-and-so, and so, then it's my turn, okay, right? So it gives them a more visual, perspective of combat as it's flowing. So if numbers are really a thing where they don't really relate, they can see their face popping up on the combat tracker as they go. Board settings are things like changing the grid from square to hex. You can change the color of the outline. Right now, it doesn't have a very precise sort of alignment tool. So if you do have maps that you're putting down are basically gridded already, you might see some overlap. But you can make some changes. If you have a premium subscription, you can even go so far as to give yourself a background, which I thought was really cool. So that reinforces the fact that you're actually on a play space and you're not just looking at a 2D map. So it sort of surrounds it, right? And then you've got different options. You can click on, flames. They've got winter, dungeon environment, forest, right? And different color palettes to go with it, right? And it just basically just reaffirms that 3D space that you're playing in. Now, speaking of maps, very simple. So you go into your computer and you say, look, I have a pre-done map, a 2D map that I found. I'm going to upload it. And watch how simple this is. Harpy uploads it. It can't be more than 10 megs. But the minute it uploads, you don't have to do anything. Except for wait. There you go. Look at that. The map is there. Now this is a small map that I have here. Now you can actually change the size of this grid. So like right now you're going, oh my goodness, that's too small. How big do these things get? You just go down to board. And you go down to the size of that, and I can go down, and there we go. And now we go, my board's bigger because I changed the size of the, but again, Harpy does all the heavy lifting. You've now populated a very easy to run combat encounter. So very quickly, I wouldn't recommend you do this on the fly, but if you are transitioning from one table to the next, it's very easy to do. I won't get too much into the asset side, but it does have some pre-populated low-res visual assets like trees. So if you want to add a little bit more of a sense that, hey, this is a 3D space that we're playing in, you can do it right there. Now I'm going to leave the video off. The last thing I'm going to show you is how you can access some of that information that we talked about earlier. So as a Dungeon Master, for example. So over here, you're going to see chats, codecs, and players. So I'm going to go back to that scene. And I'm going to go to inside the crypt. That's where we played today. You can see I've got a combat tracker and everything going already. And I've got assets in here. This is a fun little adventure. We're doing like a one-shot in our own campaign world. And so I won't go into the detail, but the players are basically sneaking around this crypt, watching what was happening, and then things kind of went wrong, as most things do in D&D. So I'm not going to adjust this, but over here on the codex, I've preloaded codexes into this scene or this table. Some of them the players can see, some of them they can't. So right now is defaulted on, or the one that I've got highlighted is the Feather Sky campaign. I forgot to put a description. This is my DM notes. And if I want more room to read my DM notes, I can just slide the map out like that. I'll get rid of this here. There you go. That doesn't affect the players. They still see what they see. But again, I have all my D&D notes here, all my DM notes. And it's one right there. And I can just scroll down. The other thing that I did, now you could put the stat blocks of the creatures in there. But up here, I've gone and created those codexes for the individual creatures. And again, I've linked them. So watch, if I click on this, it opens up a separate window for me with the stats of the cultists. And then I can go back to my table. So now I can click on that instead of using this one, right? Same thing with the white. You know, it's there. If I want to open up the white stat block, boom, it pulls it up right there because I've linked that when I actually created that codex entry. I put a link to this page right here. And then, well, those are the notes there. And then the game information, the game world information as well as there. Not that I need it, but I've put it there for the players to access. Another one is the rule set. The Epic Edition and Compendium is there. So on the fly, if we're trying to reference something, I've given all my players access to it and they need to know something. I can just go over here and go, yeah, we're talking about exhaustion. How about some active combat that we were talking about? All the rules are there. These are rules that we're adding to the game of D&D and changing. So they're not built into any archive yet. We have to manually reference them. So that's sort of how codexes exist in the actual table. I haven't gone to a separate window. I haven't gone to a separate website. It's all there for me. So I'm going to end off with the chat tab in Harpy, and that's pretty cool too. So like most virtual tabletops, you've got the ability to type something in right there, and that will pop up for all your players to see. They've gone one step further and created a dice roller, a manual dice roller. So if I want to roll a 1d20, I just type in 1d20, hit enter, and it's quick. I can go 1d20 plus 4. And the neat thing about this, and this harkens back to old school D&D, is that it's like you're picking up dice and rolling it, right? But you know, you can't underestimate the amount of time it takes to flip through windows, look for things, click it, wait for the digital dice to roll, stitch over, right? If I know I'm fighting a creature and it's got a +4 to hit and I need to roll a hit roll, I'm just going to go 1d20 plus 4 and it rolls it right away. I don't need to go and find my character sheet. And that was some of the challenges that I think my players are having, is they feel that if the technology is there, they have to use it. And they're not relying on their own brain, right? Like where we learned about, you know, what my attack bonus was. Back in the day, I could ask any of my friends and they would tell me what their to hit bonus is. Now, people from around can't remember because it was on a character sheet. It's like speed dial. Nobody knows what their friends' phone numbers are anymore because they're on speed dial. Well, if that's a problem, come over here to macros and name it Cobalt Sword. Go 1d20 plus 4. Piercing type, sure. And I'll even give it an icon. Oh, sorry. There we go. So it's there. So I just do that. Roll dice all day long. I don't even have to. It's right in Harpy now. So creating shortcuts is an easy way to speed up your gameplay. You can attach images, and down here finally you can go and stitch in with Beyond 20. You can stitch in your D&D Beyond. So that, my friends, is an overview of Harpy. How it can impact your play, how it can engage your players in a way more visually entertaining way. And like I said, I just caution you that you use the tool, but don't forget that you are playing a role-playing game, and you do need to infuse this technology with your own style of flair and description. So if you're inherently not good at that, Harpy won't make you better. It might help you with some tools. I would also recommend going over to Hero Forge and bringing, just experiment. If you are going to use this program, spending some money on 3D model tokens is definitely worthwhile. It'll probably just add to the enjoyment. So if you have any questions, leave comments in the YouTube channel. I want to say thank you for staying with me as long as you did. But in the meantime, if you haven't, subscribe, follow me, click on that notification bar. Hopefully we'll have some more content centered around Harpy soon. Everybody have a great night.